In December 1944, a young American soldier sat hunched over a chipped enamel mug in a drafty room of Hall Place, a former British manor house in Kent. Outside, snow dusted the hedgerows. Inside, the air smelled of damp wool, cigarette smoke, and stale coffee. On the table before him lay stacks of paper covered in five-letter groups: QJXKM, VBNRT, LPOIU, gibberish transcribed from German radio frequencies. His fingers ached from hours of copying signals letter by letter. He was Private First Class Hervey Hoffler, stationed at a listening post codenamed Santa Fe. Like hundreds of other Allied radio intercept operators across Britain, his job was simple: capture every transmission, transcribe it exactly, and forward it, marked KR, for Kriegswichtig, war important, via encrypted teletype to a place the Americans knew only as Station X. He had no idea where Station X was. He had no idea what happened to his messages, and in December 1944, as news of the Battle of the Bulge reached Kent, of American boys dying in frozen foxholes ambushed by a German offensive that seemed to materialize from thin air, he felt a sinking certainty. The codebreakers had failed. All this work, all these months of vigilance, had been for nothing. The Nazis were winning. What Hoffler didn't know, and what nearly no one outside a tight circle of British officials knew, was that he was sitting at the edge of the most successful intelligence operation in human history. 50 miles away, in a nondescript Victorian estate called Bletchley Park, a secret war had already been won, not with tanks or bombers, but with logic, mathematics, and an unshakable commitment to empirical truth. The Germans never knew their Enigma cipher had been broken, and that ignorance cost them the war. The Enigma machine was not magic. It was engineering, elegant, precise, and terrifyingly effective. At its core, Enigma resembled a typewriter connected to a series of rotors, wired wheels that scrambled electrical signals. When an operator pressed A, current flowed through the rotors, which shifted position with each keystroke, producing a different output letter, say Q. Press A again and it might become M. The result was a polyalphabetic cipher of staggering complexity. What made Enigma secure was not just its mechanism, but its key system. Each day, German operators received new settings: which rotors to use, in what order, with what ring positions, and how to plug the front panel board. Without the daily key, an intercepted message was mathematically indecipherable. The Germans calculated that brute forcing all possible combinations would take longer than the age of the universe. They were wrong, but their confidence was not unfounded. In the 1920s, Polish cryptographers Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Ruzicki, and Henryk Zygalski had cracked an early version of Enigma using mathematical group theory and a device they called the bomba. By 1938, they could read German Army and Air Force traffic regularly. But when Germany upgraded Enigma, adding more rotors, changing key procedures, the Polish system collapsed. On the eve of war, they shared their findings with British and French intelligence. It was a gift that changed everything. In 1939, Britain's Secret Intelligence Service, under Admiral Hugh Sinclair, purchased Bletchley Park, not for its grandeur, but for its location, a railway junction linking London to Oxford and Cambridge. Sinclair and his deputy Alastair Denniston understood that the coming war would be fought not only with bullets but with brains. They needed minds that could see patterns in chaos, chess masters who thought 12 moves ahead, mathematicians who spoke in symbols, linguists who heard syntax like music. They recruited unconventionally, Women, dismissed by traditional military thinking as unsuitable for crucial work, were hired in the thousands. Academics too old for combat. Pacifists, even men whose sexuality would have barred them from public life, were welcomed. One recruit was Alan Turing. Turing was not a soldier, he was a logician. At 22, he had redefined the limits of computation with his concept of a universal machine, a theoretical device that could perform any calculation if given the right instructions. By 1939, he was working alongside Einstein at Princeton. But when war came, Turing returned to Britain. Not out of patriotism alone. But breaking the code was only the beginning. Bletchley Park grew into a city of intellect. Wooden huts sprouted across the grounds, each dedicated to a specific task. Hut 6 decrypted Army and Air Force Enigma. Hut 8, led by Turing, tackled the even more complex naval Enigma, critical because U-boats were strangling Atlantic supply lines. Hut 3 translated and analyzed the decrypts, deciding which intelligence was urgent enough to send to commanders in the field. At its peak, over 10,000 people worked at Bletchley and its outstations. Ranks were abandoned. Saluting ceased. What mattered was competence. Operators, many of them women, ran the bombs 24 hours a day, 3 shifts cycling through. Analysts cross-referenced intercepts with shipping logs, weather reports, and prisoner interrogations to verify cribs. The system was not one genius, but a network of specialists, each doing a small part of a vast puzzle. And feeding that system were listening posts like Santa Fe. Hoffler and his comrades at Hall Place were part of a ring of radio intercept stations scattered across Britain. When they captured a transmission, they transcribed it verbatim, every letter, every number, and sent it to Bletchley. Urgent messages went by teletype, others by courier. They never learned whether their work led to breakthroughs. They simply collected, transcribed, and forwarded hour after hour, day after day. Then came the Battle of the Bulge. In December 1944, Hitler launched his last major offensive in the West. Knowing that Allied intelligence relied on radio intercepts, he ordered minimal wireless communication. Instead, German units used motorcycle couriers and landlines. The result was operational security, but at a crippling cost. Commanders couldn't coordinate. Reserves arrived late. Fuel ran out. Allied generals, accustomed to advanced warning from Bletchley decrypts, were caught off guard. At Santa Fe, Hoffler watched the news with dread. To him, it seemed proof that Enigma was unbreakable, that all their work had been futile. Nothing could have been further from the truth. By 1943, Bletchley was reading German messages faster than some German commanders received them. U-boat positions in the Atlantic were tracked in real time. Convoys rerouted around wolf packs that never knew they'd been spotted. In North Africa, Rommel's supply lines were mapped with precision. His fuel tankers were sunk by submarines waiting at exact coordinates. Before D-Day, Bletchley intercepts confirmed that the Germans believed the main invasion would come at Calais, not Normandy. Entire panzer divisions sat idle while Allied troops secured their beachhead. Historians estimate Bletchley's work shortened the war by at least 2 years, saving millions of lives. Churchill called the Bletchley staff the geese that laid the golden eggs and never cackled. But after victory, the geese were silenced. Every person who worked at Bletchley signed the Official Secrets Act. For nearly 30 years, through the Cold War, through the rise of nuclear deterrence, through the decolonization of empire, they spoke to no one. Husbands didn't tell wives. Parents didn't tell children. The bombs were dismantled, the huts repurposed. Bletchley Park became a forgotten government facility. When Hoffler was demobilized in 1945, he signed his secrecy pledge with bitterness. He had nothing worth hiding, he thought. His work had meant nothing. Then, in the 1970s, the veil lifted. Former Bletchley officers published memoirs. Books appeared describing the impossible pressure, the sleepless nights, the quiet triumphs. Hoffler, now a civilian, living an ordinary life, read them eagerly. And he discovered the truth. His intercepts from Santa Fe had been vital. Those meaningless five-letter groups were the raw data the Bombas needed. Every transmission gave Bletchley more crids, more patterns, more chances to crack that day's key. The Battle of the Bulge hadn't proven Bletchley's failure. It had proven the Germans' desperation. They knew their cipher was vulnerable, so they avoided radio altogether, sacrificing command efficiency to preserve secrecy. It was a tacit admission. They feared Allied intelligence. Hoffler also learned about Alan Turing's fate. After the war, when Turing's homosexuality was exposed, he was prosecuted for gross indecency. In 1952, he accepted chemical castration as an alternative to prison. In 1954, he died by cyanide poisoning. His war-winning contributions still classified, his persecution unknown to the public. Only decades later would Britain formally pardon him and recognize him as a national hero. He learned about the women of Bletchley, thousands of them, who operated the bombs, performed calculations, translated intercepts, and did so in total anonymity. Many came from elite universities but worked without recognition, driven not by glory, but by duty. And he learned a deeper truth about the German failure. German intelligence had, in fact, received warnings about Enigma's vulnerability. In 1940, a German naval officer captured in Norway carried documents suggesting Allied decryption. In 1942, a U-boat commander reported suspiciously accurate Allied convoy rerouting. But Nazi ideology could not accept that their racially superior cipher could be broken by decadent democracies. Reports were dismissed, warnings ignored. This was not an isolated error. Germany had accurate intelligence about American industrial capacity and chose not to believe it. They had accurate intelligence about Soviet resilience and chose not to believe it. Reality kept contradicting ideology, and when that happened, Nazi Germany picked ideology. Bletchley Park, by contrast, was built on empirical clarity. There was no room for dogma. If a crib didn't work, you tried another. If a rotor setting failed, you eliminated it. Truth was not a matter of belief, but of evidence. The legacy of Bletchley extends far beyond the war. The bomb was an electromechanical computer, the direct ancestor of the digital age. Turing's theoretical work laid the foundation for modern computer science. The organizational model, diverse specialists working outside hierarchy, focused purely on problem solving, became the blueprint for research institutions worldwide. And the recognition that intelligence required analysts, not just spies, led to the creation of modern signals intelligence agencies like NSA and GCHQ. But perhaps its greatest lesson is this: wars are not won by courage alone, though courage matters. Not by weapons alone, though weapons matter. They are won by information, by the patient, unglamorous work of collecting data, finding patterns, and making decisions based on reality, not wishful thinking. The Germans had brave soldiers. They had advanced technology. They had tactical brilliance. What they lacked was the humility to see the world as it was. Bletchley Park saw it with crystalline clarity, and that clarity changed the world. Today, Bletchley is a museum. You can walk through Hut 6, sit at a reconstructed bomb, Hear the rhythmic click of rotors testing combinations. But what you cannot see is the 30-year silence, the weight of keeping a secret so profound it reshaped history. Harvey Hoffler eventually wrote his own book, Codebreaker's Victory, because the British accounts rarely mentioned the Americans who fed the system. He wanted people to know that GIs too had played a part, even if they didn't know it at the time. His story captures the essence of Bletchley. Most people there never saw the full picture. They transcribed, they operated machines, they analyzed fragments. But together, their small contributions added up to something miraculous. It was mathematics defeating machinery, patience defeating complexity, reality defeating ideology. And for 3 decades, it was a secret so well kept that the people who won the war with their minds couldn't even tell their children what they'd done. When the truth finally emerged, it changed how we understand World War II. The beaches and battlefields mattered, but so did a Victorian mansion 50 miles from London, where history's brightest minds fought and won a war of pure intellect. Some secrets are worth keeping. Others are too important to stay hidden forever. Bletchley Park was both. The story of Bletchley Park is not one of lone geniuses or dramatic reveals, but of thousands of ordinary people doing extraordinary work in silence, driven not by fame, but by fidelity to truth. If you believe history should honor not just the soldiers who fought, but the thinkers who enabled victory, if you value depth over drama and accuracy over myth, we invite you to subscribe. This channel is dedicated to preserving the real legacy of World War II, not as entertainment, but as testament. Because those who served in shadow deserve to be remembered in light.